Today we're gonna talk about this. It's the Steam Machine. It is a small cube-sized gaming PC powered by SteamOS. If you've been following this thing, there was a massive pre-release hype. It faced a lot of criticism upon its launch. Did it really deserve it? Does it live up to the hype? Let's find out. As a PC gamer and a Linux enthusiast, I've been super excited about the Steam Machine since the day it was announced. I spent more than a third of my playtime gaming on Steam Deck. I love SteamOS, so the idea of its stationary version in a small form factor case with a huge computing power capable of gaming in 1440p and even 4K immediately grabbed all my attention. Calling Steam Machine a small form factor PC though would be a huge understatement. All the hardware is packed into a ridiculously tiny 3.5 liter plastic cube, and the cooling system takes most of that space, helping Steam Machine to stay silent even in the heaviest stress. This is my regular coffee cup for comparison, here's an iPhone 16 Pro, and also my wife's AirPods Max. To squeeze this much computing power into a cube with an edge of 16cm, Valve had to make a lot of thoughtful design choices. Steam Machine comes with its own semi-custom system on chip, built by AMD, with a 6-core CPU clocked at 4.8 GHz, an RDNA-free GPU with 8 GB of GDDR6 memory, which may sound not that impressive in 2026, but hold your horses, benchmarks are coming. Steam Machine is also going to provide a great value for anyone who's already got a Steam Deck. It comes with a high-speed microSD slot, the same as on Steam Deck, so you can hot swap memory cards and transfer games between these two devices almost instantly. They're both running on the same version of SteamOS, so any game available on your Steam Deck would be 100% playable on Steam Machine. And Steam Controller features basically the same control scheme as the Steam Deck, so every in-game layout made on Steam Deck will work here as well. And if you don't want to play with a controller, you can just plug your mouse and keyboard and enjoy competitive shooters as PC gaming gods intended. Valve did everything to ensure that any plugged-in keyboard and mouse will work out of the box, but keep in mind that most gaming peripheral brands like Razer, Corsair, Pulsar and others do not provide native apps for Linux, so you won't be able to adjust polling rate and set up RGB without additional tricks. Steam Controller, on the other hand, is a perfect input device to play from the couch. It comes with 2 symmetrically placed thumbsticks, 4 assignable grip buttons on the back, and 2 trackpads. You're gonna need them in games that were released long before controllers became mainstream on PC. The trackpads are engineered to offer precise in-game navigation similar to a mouse and feel just as good as the ones on a Steam Deck. And even if you don't spend that much time playing first-person shooters, trackpads will be welcomed in time dealing with launchers and other setup tools fairly common on PC. And because of how good and accurate these trackpads are, you can also use Steam Controller as a glorified Bluetooth mouse and keyboard, while watching movies in a living room with a PC plugged into your TV. A quick glance in the rear ports reveals a couple of limitations. First of all, there are only 2 video outputs, HDMI 2.0 and DisplayPort 1.4, so in most cases you might be able to connect it only to 2 displays simultaneously. Since Steam Machine is meant to sit in a living room plugged into a TV, that's not a design flaw, that's a feature. Though it may upset some glorious quadruple monitor PC enthusiasts. Also, keep in mind that there is no 3.5mm headphone jack. You have to connect your audio through the USB ports or use wireless headphones. For some people it might be a deal breaker, for me it's not. All my audio goes through a USB jack, and also Steam Machine can do audio pass-through via HDMI, so that covers most of my use cases. The setup process is extremely simple, it's almost identical to what you've seen on the Steam Deck. You just turn it on, select language, log into your Steam account and download available update. And that's it! Boom, you're ready to play! Steam Machine comes with the latest version of SteamOS, Valve's own operating system built on Arch Linux. It is lightweight, memory efficient and designed for both casual gamers and power users. Just as on Steam Deck, you can tweak performance settings straight from the quick access menu, by limiting frame rate, setting up variable refresh rate and basic FSR. Except Valve removed the overclocking options and the ability to limit TDP, to ensure system stability and predictable thermal performance. You can put this thing to sleep in the middle of gameplay just like the Steam Deck and wake it up later to continue playing from the same moment. Heck, the Steam Machine itself has a hostname Steam Deck in the settings, so every time you're trying to stream a game from your Steam Machine to a deck, it says stream from a Steam Deck. Some games like Skyrim are losing their minds enforcing a 16:10 aspect ratio, since they've been gaslighted that they are running on a Steam Deck. Just as the Steam Deck, Steam Machine relies on the special compatibility layer called Proton to run Windows games on Linux, and so each and every game on Steam is rated as Steam Machine verified, playable or unsupported. You can also filter your own library to see a list of games rated as great on Steam Machine, and that's where things get tricky, because to get on this list the game needs to run at least at 30 FPS in 1080p, which is for many people the opposite of being great. So today I would like to focus on a real in-game performance to give you an idea of what this thing is capable of in 1440p and native 4K. I'm also going to compare Steam Machine to my own relatively mid-tier gaming PC and focus on the actual user experience. Now it would take me quite a while to install everything and do a proper testing, but I'll be back to you in a couple of seconds, thanks to the magic of video editing. Alright, here we are, let's look at the graphs. Must admit I was pleasantly surprised by how capable Steam Machine turned out to be, especially at 1440p, like most games I'm interested in are running way above 60 frames in native 1440p on high settings. Sadly, that's not the case for every single title I've tested, and in some cases I had to dive deep into settings to squeeze 60 frames in 4K or even 1440p, either by lowering the resolution or enabling FSR. After spending hundreds of hours in a dozen of games, I've ended up with kinda 3 universal graphics presets to show you what kind of performance brackets you should think about before buying a Steam Machine. Let's call these presets Quality, Performance and Ultra Performance. Quality preset is for those who prefer visual fidelity at the cost of performance, like high settings at native 4K and 30 frames per second. That's what you might expect from Red Dead Redemption 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart and Arc Raiders, again in native 4K. And in more graphically demanding titles like Cyberpunk 2077 and 007 First Light, you would have to enable FSR quality to achieve 30 frames per second. The image quality though would still be decent. Performance preset on the other hand is for those who are willing to sacrifice a little bit of visual fidelity just to get stable 60 frames. We're talking about 1440p, medium to high settings and sometimes enabled FSR. That's what gets you stable 60 FPS in most recent titles, and that's what I think would be my personal sweet spot. And if that's not enough, you can always squeeze even more frames by setting resolution to 1080p and enabling FSR, so your game would be effectively rendered in 720p. Obviously it's going to look absolutely terrible on a 4K monitor, thanks to the visual artifacts from upscaling, but that's what I would call Ultra Performance preset. Please note that these presets are relevant mostly to modern AAA titles. Steam Machine is perfectly capable of running indie games at native 4K 60, and less graphically intensive releases like GTA 5 Enhanced are perfectly playable at 1440p at 100 frames per second. Same applies to The Witcher 3, which runs at 90 frames and even more if you're willing to play the classic DirectX 11 version without ray tracing. Uncharted 4 gives you 60 to 70 frames in most intense moments of the game, and my beloved Battlefield 4 runs at 4K 100 frames per second. What I'm trying to say is that Steam Machine is probably the best option for clearing the backlog. If you don't spend your time playing the most recent AAA slop, you'd be happy with it. As someone who spends a lot of time gaming on Steam Deck, I developed a habit of shopping for games with adequate system requirements, and since Steam Machine is up to 6 times more powerful than Steam Deck, most of the games I'm playing on Steam Deck work on Steam Machine either at 1440p or 4K 60. Also, check this out, this thing was at full load for like an hour now, and the GPU sitting just at a 70 degrees Celsius at the room temperature and the fan is spinning just at 1000 RPM. That's wonderful! Even though SteamOS is designed to provide a simple plug-and-play gaming experience, Steam Machine is still a PC. There's a whole working desktop environment called KDE Plasma that will come in handy if you would need to install music player, download some mods, and chat with your friends on Discord. Can you do 3D modeling with this thing? Yes. Can you edit photos and videos on the Steam Machine? Yes. Is it good for either of those? Not really. Steam Machine has plenty of horsepower to run professional creative software, but all the popular apps like Adobe Photoshop and After Effects are not available on Linux. DaVinci Resolve on the other hand is technically working, however SteamOS is not officially supported by Blackmagic. Also, there's no hardware acceleration for heavy media codecs like Apple ProRes. So if you're thinking about buying Steam Machine for a certain creative task, like video editing, that's not going to be a best value purchase. This thing was designed by the gamers for the gamers, and that's where it excels the most. I've been playing some really demanding games on it for long periods of time, and haven't experienced any overheating problems. This is a solid machine that will remain relevant for many years to come. What you should be worried about though is VRAM. Steam Machine comes with only 8 gigs, whereas some modern games require 12 and even 16 gigs of VRAM for high-resolution 4K textures, advanced ray tracing, and large open-world asset caches. It's not that big of a deal today, but you can already find games with requirements of 8 gigs of VRAM as a minimum spec. So the VRAM is the main limiting factor. Should you buy this thing or not totally depends on the spec sheet of the system you're using right now. If you have a flagship GPU with more VRAM, obviously it's going to perform way better than the Steam Machine with its own semi-custom system on chip. But what if you have PC with roughly similar specs to the Steam Machine but built 5 or 6 years ago on older architecture, like this one? I've built this PC in 2021, it has RTX 3070 with only 8GB of VRAM, and 8-core CPU instead of 6. But these cores are Zen 2, not Zen 4, and this whole thing is powered by a 650W PSU. The RTX 3070 alone has a power draw of 220 watts, whereas Steam Machine comes with a 200W power supply total, which makes this comparison even spicier. Will this 5-year-old PC perform better comparing to the Steam Machine? Well, I have an answer for that. Let's start with Red Dead Redemption 2 as an example of stunningly beautiful and well-optimized game. At native 1440p, both Steam Machine and RTX 3070 can achieve from 70 to 80 FPS without much of a hassle. Steam Machine even goes few frames ahead. Please note that I'm referring to my old PC simply as RTX 3070, since GPU anyway does most of the job, and it's just easier to read 2 words on the graph. And if we crank up the resolution to native 4K, both PCs will drop the ball below 60 FPS. However, on RTX 3070 I can enable DLSS and get the cherished 60 frames, whereas on AMD there is only FSR2, and FSR2 doesn't give that much of a performance boost. Also, in games with FSR frame generations like AC Shadows, you can notice coasting effects and other glitches. In Arc Raiders we got similar results on both systems, and yet again in 4K RTX 3070 gets an advantage thanks to how good DLSS is. However, in other games like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, the difference in framerate between RTX 3070 and Steam Machine is astronomical. You see, Nvidia support for Linux is notoriously bad. Some titles like Forza Horizon 6 and 007 First Light were completely broken on Linux day one on Nvidia systems. In case of 007, Nvidia confirmed it was their fault and promised to send a patch with the next drivers, but the bruised ego still hurts. I didn't like the fact that I had to wait for a week while my friends were James Bonding all over the place. There are also games like AC Shadows, only seeing 4 gigs of memory out of 8 that my RTX 3070 has at its disposal. Steam Machine has none of those issues. Valve and AMD did an incredible job of optimizing this mini PC, putting exceptional performance at this form factor. And now it is time to talk about the price. Steam Machine starts at $1050 for a base model with 512 gigs of storage with no controller in the box. It is way more expensive than PS5 and even PS5 Pro, but in reality of RAMpocalypse, Valve's offering is pretty competitive. Like yes, PS5 Pro is cheaper, but it's a closed proprietary system that gives you no control over your games. And Red Dead Redemption 2 on the PS5 Pro still to this day runs at 30 frames on the same resolution and graphics preset it was released for PS4 Pro. Like if the game hasn't received a dedicated next-gen patch from a developer, you can't change anything. On Steam Machine on the other hand, you can run this game at any resolution you want. You can run it at 80 frames in 1440p. You can try and squeeze 60 frames at native 4K with medium settings. You can install mods. You can do so much with this thing, it really puts Sony to shame. Steam library is way bigger than what modern consoles can imagine, and thanks to the fascinating backwards compatibility achieved by Proton, I can play 3 decades old games on my Steam Machine at native 4K 60 anytime I want. That's the value proposition of a PC. There are arguments online that the specs of this thing are unjustifiable at this price point, that it's just a machine with a laptop-grade hardware and anybody who buys it is doing themselves a disservice. But the truth is you can't build a 100% alternative to a Steam Machine for $1,000. I mean, you can try building a PC for a bit cheaper, but it will be nowhere near as small and silent. You can build a slightly more powerful desktop PC, but it will be less power efficient and more expensive. Also, it probably won't be a desktop. It would be sitting on the floor, choking on floor dust and gathering cat fur in enormous quantities. And no matter what you would build, you would have to build it yourself. You would have to go and search for PC parts, check if the motherboard and GPU would fit into your case, choose the right memory, choose a power supply, bang your head against the table reading nonsensical brand names like G, Skull, Fury, Beast, X, and then spend a weekend actually building this thing and installing an operating system and setting up everything, whereas Steam Machine just works out of the box. I've spent a decent amount of time in my life building PCs for myself and even more time configuring them for my friends, and to me this little cube feels like a work of art. Like, if you're in a market for a tiny PC that can handle 1440p high settings gaming, it's the only one. If you'd ask me to choose between my desktop PC and Steam Machine, I would without blink of an eye choose Steam Machine. Now, depending on who you are and what you play, Steam Machine can either be a great purchase or a terrible thing to spend money on. If you're playing lots of online games and especially competitive shooters, this thing may not satisfy your needs, because almost half of all anti-cheat protected games do not work on Linux. And what's even worse, even if the game you're playing right now works on SteamOS, there is still a chance that anti-cheat support might be revoked at any given moment, just like it happened with GTA Online, Battlefield 1 and many other titles before. I tend to believe anti-cheat support on Linux will improve significantly as more people will try switching to SteamOS. However, I wouldn't recommend buying a Steam Machine solely on the promise that it will run a specific game you're waiting for. Like, there's a real chance that GTA 6 won't be playable on Linux exactly because of the new anti-cheat that Rockstar is testing right now, so keep that in mind before making a purchase. There are also a huge chunk of software issues that Valve is patching out right now as I'm recording this video. Just through the last couple of weeks, Steam Machine received at least 3 or 4 system updates, but there are still a lot to do. Sometimes Steam Client feels kinda laggy and glitchy, sometimes sleep mode doesn't work properly, causing performance issues on wake up. One of the features that I rely on the most, game recording, makes Steam Machine to drop 20 to 30 frames when you press the record button. That is not good. I hope Valve would find a way to make it less performance taxing. Another thing that bugs me is a lack of keyboard and mouse settings in Steam Big Picture mode. Like, I can't change mouse sensitivity and enable or disable point acceleration right from the SteamOS UI. For that I would have to go to desktop mode, which is kind of a bummer. I also wish Steam Machine had better fingerprint resistance. It tends to show smudges easily and collects a lot of dust, which is annoying if your task is to film it properly. I think the main reason why Steam Machine created such a division on the internet is because everyone in the PC gaming space came here for different things. For some people, PC gaming is all about maximizing performance and building an absolute beast of a computer, with RTX 5090 and a 1000-watt power supply. For someone else, it's the freedom to play whatever games they want, especially older ones, to reconnect with the memories from their childhood. And for others, it's the ability to occasionally play games on a device they mainly use for work. Steam Machine can't be a perfect device for every single PC gamer, but it sits at the right sweet spot between all the different categories. It is capable enough to run most games at native 1440p, it runs Linux, so this PC is yours PC, and it's small enough to fit at the corner of my table, and if I want I can just grab it and take it to my living room. At the end of the day, what we got is amazing hardware packed into a tiny case that makes almost any custom built PC to look like a huge coffin. I really hope Valve will be able to iron out all software issues and turn Steam Machine into a multi-generational product. And me, I was so impressed with this thing I've ended up selling my Linux PC and switching to Steam Machine as my main gaming device and Mac Mini as my primary workstation. This was Reluctant Anarchist and I have nothing left. Just say.